I'm pleased to be here with all of you at this global convention on peace and non-violence, which is inspired by the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi. My hearty greetings to all the participants. A warm welcome to all our esteemed friends from abroad. Like many of you often wonder, why is it that the passage of time, indeed the passage of over a half century now, has not reduced the relevance of Mahatma Gandhi for India and for the entire world? Why do we feel that Gandhiji's place in history is in its future and not in its past? The answer is obvious. Mahatma Gandhi embodied the eternal and universal values of mankind. He not only preached these values, but also lived them. In the end, like many great souls in the past, he has died for them. And in dying for them, he immortalized the message of his life. Gandhiji devoted his life to three main causes. Two of them were largely focused on India. India's independence from colonial rule and India's social transformation, be it in the field of social equality, communal harmony, education, dignity of labor, Antodaya, or concern for the last man on the socio-economic ladder. What did he in these two areas? He has an enduring significance for all of us in India. It also has a strong appeal for many thinking people around the world. But the kernel of his life's message, which makes the message eternal and universal, and which makes Mohandas Karamdas Gandhi into Mahatma, is peace and non-violence. The immense moral force and the unwavering consistency with which he championed the imperative of peace and non-violence, both in the immediate neighborhood and in the world at large, brought hope to the mankind battered by wars and conflicts. Along with other champions of peace and humanism in the world, he contributed to mankind's regaining of faith in itself. Many people, including peace-loving people, are often tempted to think that Gandhiji's ideal for peace is just an illusion, with no chance of ever becoming reality. This is because the world continues to be scarred and wounded by violence and in many forms. However, the mere continuation of violence cannot negate the need for non-violence. Rather, it provides an added reason and imparts further agency to our research for peace. Echoing the belief that all humanistic thinkers around the world, Gandhiji insisted that violence is not the natural state of human existence. Men and society yearn for life without violence. Their most mundane needs, as well as their deepest aspirations, can be fulfilled only in conditions of peace. Sometimes, nations may go to war, and some groups may fight with each other. But sooner or later, they realize the futility of bloodshed and the utility of dialogue. Distinguished friends, the point I wish to make is that the contest between violence and peace need not be a never-ending refrain in the song of humanity's future. This may sound like an audacious statement, more akin to wishful thinking than to the man's historical experience. But I believe that there are certain objective factors in the modern history that have strengthened the forces of peace relative to the forces of violence. The first among those peace enhancing objective factors is the power of democracy. When more and more people participate in the affairs of a nation and in determining what should be done and what should not be done, the chances of their opting for a peaceful course are always greater than otherwise. In the later half of the 20th century, not only has the power of democracy grown worldwide, but several international and multinational institutions working on democratic principles have also been founded. The UN and its affiliate organizations are the most important among them. For the first time in human history, so many people, their governments, and other representative organizations across the world are engaged in dialogue, interaction, cooperation, and conflict resolution. Even at the level of civil society, never in the past had so many citizens and their non-governmental organizations belonging to different countries and communities been interacting with each other so extensively as they do now. For example, a global convention of this kind on peace and non-violence was unthinkable in the past. I think that this self-assertion of democratic powers augurs well for peace in the world tomorrow. This is a second factor. In the past 50 years, the international community has debated and adopted many treaties for peace and disarmament, bilaterally, regionally, and in the United Nations. The importance of these treaties should not be belittled. No doubt, all countries should act upon these treaties with sincerity. In this, great powers have greater responsibility than others to act with responsibility and self-restraint. Collectively, we must take the world swiftly towards the goal of disarmament and specifically elimination of all weapons of mass destruction in the 21st century. The existence of the United Nations is perhaps the single most important reason why the world has been able to prevent major wars from breaking out after World War II. However, the UN system needs to be reformed and restructured to accurately reflect the contemporary realities as well as to make it more effective in dealing with the challenges of today's world. Recent developments have sharply illustrated this need. The third peace-enhancing objective factor is that both technology and trade have made the world much more interdependent, integrated, and smaller than we could ever have imagined. Today, people and nations know that they meet each other in those events of sports, culture, entertainment, and economic relationships, which did not happen much in the past. They communicate to reach each other through mass media in ways that were unimaginable in the past. It is said that the world has shrunk to a global village. I can say from the Indian experience, and that is perhaps also the experience of villages worldwide, that people of a village know how to live together in peace and how to resolve conflicts through dialogue by showing sensitivity to each other's genuine concerns. It is of course true that the modern world is seeing new threats to peace. Terrorism inspired by religious extremists is one of them. Perhaps no country has suffered as much from this threat as India has. The threat of terrorism has to be dealt with firmly, both through the action of individual nations and through the international solidarity. However, I am confident that this is a passing phase and the world's collective effort will succeed in dealing with this menace. Among other things, my optimism lies in the fact that all the religions and cultures of the world have enshrined peace and non-violence as their guiding principle. Friends, we in India are inheritors to great civilization whose life chant has been Shanti, that is peace, and Bhaichara, which means brotherhood. India has never been an aggressor nature, a colonizer, or a hegemony in a long history. In modern times, we are alive to our responsibility to contribute to peace, friendship, and cooperation, both in our region and around the world. India has always believed in having peaceful, friendly, and cooperative relations with all the neighbors. We are happy that 12th Summit of SAARC nations, which was held in Islamabad earlier this year, was a major step forward in the regional cooperation. As I said at the summit, we have to change South Asia's image and standing in the world. We must make the bold transition from mistrust to trust, from discord to concord, from tension to peace. It is in the same spirit that my government has been trying to resolve all the outstanding issues with Pakistan through dialogue. With these words, I inaugurate this convention and wish it success. I am sure the cause of peace around the world will be advanced by the good thoughts shared by all the esteemed participants. Thank you.